Hi, and welcome to Around Kitsap. I'm your host, Constance Baird. We're paying a visit today to the Department of Emergency Management. This is the place where when disaster strikes, whether small or big or somewhere in between, all of the coordination of emergency services and local volunteers happens to get our community back on its feet again. Let's head inside to learn a bit more from their director.
So there's things that they're going to be familiar with in our county.
Now I'm here inside the Emergency Operations Center, and joining me is the Director of the Department of Emergency Management, Lis Klute. Liz, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yes, good morning, Constance. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'd really love for our audience to understand a little bit more about what goes on here at DEM.
Well, the Department of Emergency Management, also known as DEM, is here at a joint facility with the Kitsap 911 Center and our offices, as well as the Emergency Operations Center for the county. And what we do here is we work together collectively with our partners, both within the county and outside, to prepare for any type of an emergency, but then also to coordinate, work together, and respond to an emergency when that need arises.
Sure. And when you say coordinate, you're not kidding. This is a county organization, but I know you coordinate with all the cities. Tell me a little bit about all the other professional organizations that you coordinate with.
Sure. Well, we work with the cities. We work in our partnership for the countywide program. We have the City of Bremerton, the City of Port Orchard, and the City of Paulsbo. Bainbridge Island has a separate program for their city, but when it comes to a countywide emergency, we're all working together. We work with law enforcement, we work with the fire departments, we work with public health, and we work with environmental health. Like we had a sewage spill the other day, and so we worked with environmental health through public health in that incident. So it really depends on the type of an emergency, but we can also work with outside partners. That might be like Team Rubicon, or it might be the Lions Club. So it really depends again on what type of an emergency it is and how large of an emergency it is.
Sure, and I think that's important for all of us to understand as well. When we're talking about an emergency, I think many of us jump to the big scary earthquake that could be coming, but really there are all sorts of emergencies, big and small, that you're responding to.
Right, and it's really anything where a single department, like a fire department or law enforcement or public works, has an incident that they need additional resources or they need to have other people coordinate to respond to that incident. So let's take the tornado. It wasn't a huge incident, but it was a huge impact on the people that it impacted. Sure. But more importantly, we needed to work with solid waste at Public Works, who did an excellent job. And then we worked with the City of Port Orchard and the county, because it was right there crossing both the city and the county line.
Oh, wow.
And so we also work with the state of Washington, and we are the pass-through from the county, from the cities to the county to the state, and from the state up to the federal level when we have an emergency. And so it works. It's pretty simple, actually. We can, when an incident gets to a large enough level that it's impacting our resources and we start running out of resources, let's say the winter storm. If some of the other counties or cities in the jurisdiction of the Puget Sound were running low on sand and de-icer, then we all got together as emergency management on a call with the state and said what our needs were. And then the state sort of acts as that larger coordinator to say, well, we found a source and let's figure out how we're going to allocate.
Sure.
Now, luckily for Kitsap County, because we work prior to an emergency in the preparedness phase, we had enough de-icer and we had enough sand. And again, that's related to the county departments like Public Works that thought ahead and were prepared.
Sure. Man, that's a lot of moving pieces, really, for your department. That's really fascinating. And I know that a lot of that work is not just professional organizations, but volunteer organizations, which you touched on a little bit as well. Volunteers for your department, volunteers for other community groups. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, we have volunteers here within our department as well. In fact, we have over 800 people registered as volunteers for the Department of Emergency Management. And so the community emergency response teams, the CERT teams that you hear about, those are part of our organization. We also have ham radio operators. We have a program called CARS, which is the Kitsap Auxiliary Radio System. So it can be VHF radio, it can be Marine Band radio, or ham operators work together to give us backup communications. But then we also work, for instance, in the tornado. Let me give you that example. Because it's very recent.
Sure.
We worked with the Lions Club. They went out and got a grant in order to enable immediate response to get personal protective equipment for members of the public who are out there helping remove trees and remove limbs. So gloves, goggles, reflective jackets so that they stood out if someone was driving by so they weren't at risk. So buying down risk or reducing risk, that's really the priority. And then following that, we had the Red Cross was running the shelter. They also started what we call case management, so that's collecting what are the needs of the people who were impacted.
Right.
And then we had Team Rubicon come in and do a lot of the cutting away of the major trees and major debris. And then the United Methodist came in, so you can see there's a lot of players. So United Methodist came in and they started doing our volunteer management for us so we could get back here to the Emergency Operations Center and focus on that larger communication. And then they passed that on and are still working with the Salvation Army to do the case management to meet the needs for the people that were impacted. So a lot of moving pieces, as you said.
Yeah, a lot of work going on, not just during the emergency itself when it was imminent, but like here we are a few months past, and there's still a lot of work to be done there, like you said, with case management, rebuilding, and that's just one incident that you guys were involved in.
And not a terribly large one either.
Sure.
Again, major impact for some people, but on the broader scope of things, not necessarily that big. So one of the things that I think the public isn't aware of, and maybe even some agencies are not aware of, is that when you get into the recovery phase, depending on the emergency, that phase can last years.
I bet. And really what I'm hearing from you is you guys here at the Department of Emergency Management, you're constantly thinking about the what ifs. The what if this happens, how do we fix it, how do we help our community? Really you're kind of taking a load off of all of our shoulders as the common citizens and handling a lot of that thought process, the pre-planning, kind of the insurance for what happens if. What would you say to our audience, to all the people in the community? What can they do themselves to empower themselves to be more prepared?
Well, what we'd really like the public to focus on is resiliency and self-preparedness, because we're all going to be here during a major emergency, working together, working collectively, and we're not going to be able to be there at the individual homes necessarily. So, what we'd like you to do is buy down your own risk. So take an inventory at your home, get prepared. We have a brochure, it's called 2 Weeks Ready, and you can go through this and it tells you, how much water you need to take care of your pets. There's also a pull-out here, which is personal information like your emergency contacts, and especially have an emergency contact that's outside the area. So someone that everyone in your family can call and say, I'm okay, right? And also there's information here on your doctors, your insurance companies, and having something like this is really handy because what we call the third law of emergency management is stress makes you stupid. So, and we've all had to deal with that.
We've all been there.
Yeah, so the better prepared you are, and the more muscle memory that you have on what to do during an emergency, just like having a fire evacuation plan for your house, right? And a meeting place. You should think along the same lines when it comes to a disaster, so that when a disaster happens, you're okay, and you have what you need, and you know who to get a hold of outside this jurisdiction to let them know that you're okay, so your extended family and friends know that you're okay. So, you focus on getting yourself prepared, and we'll focus on getting the county prepared.
I love it. Well, I know what I need to go home and do. I hope that you do too. Thanks so much for all that you do here, Liz. I think it's great for the community to understand what happens and what we can do to empower ourselves and be prepared as well. I know that if people are looking for more information, if you'd like to volunteer or if you'd like more information about how to get yourself ready, you can do that at kitsapdem.org. And I just want to thank you again so much, Liz.
Well, thank you very much, and come again.